get into any of that and bragging on people. So quick ground rules for these conversations. It will be recorded. We ask that everyone leaves their audio muted unless you are talking. Would you leave your video unmuted so that we can see your face for the healthiness and the transparency of this dialogue? We will not grant AI permissions of any kind whatsoever to record for your personal uses. We are recording this as well, and we will make sure that it gets distributed to all of those that are on this call, as well as those that have been invited. You will be asked at some point in time to introduce yourself. Let us know if you are DVULI alumni, what year you went through the program, and what city. But I would also ask that whatever backgrounds you have, if those would maintain being either appropriate, and if you need to move to a different space, we would appreciate that as well, just again, so that there is no aesthetic issues or distractions. Please use the chat at your discretion as much as possible for positive reactions, resources, or contact information. And if you are in transit, we ask that you do not use the chat and that you keep your eyes on the road, but ideally pull over and park. A little disclaimer, we are not responsible for any accidents that may happen while you are driving wherever you're going, okay? No matter what your reactions might be to the content. On that note, for those of you that require an introduction, my name is Gerald Bell. I'm a 2003 graduate of the DeVos Urban Leadership Initiative, Kansas City, and full-time staff here in Grand Rapids, Michigan with RDP Corporation, where DeVos Urban Leadership Initiative is housed. It's my privilege always to introduce my colleague, producer, and all around just, man, she can do everything. Stephanie Donovan, fellow runner, etc., and more. All right, good stuff. I mentioned Aaron Hawksworth already, one of our colleagues here at the foundation. Good to have him on. He works in our grants division. And our director of operations, Shannon Pothoven, is joining us as well from Grand Rapids also. This is an option work from home day for some of us. And so if we all don't look like we're chained to an office somewhere, that's why, okay? All right. And I'm going to introduce our moderators here real quick. We are also blessed to have a special guest on with us as well today, one of our alumni from Columbus, Ohio, my home state, OHIO. Esther Flores is here with us as well. But Monique Johnson from Washington, D.C., and now living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then Robynne Jeisman from Fresno, California, is on with us as well, class of 2023. They will be your moderators for the day. Esther joins us from Columbus as a guest on this program because of the work that she's been doing, making major impact in this particular subject matter. And so on that note, I'm going to close my mouth, mute my microphone, and let Monique and Monique and Robynne take it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gerald, for this opportunity to share about and just have this discussion around human trafficking. We are so excited to have this chance to talk with everyone. But we really want you all to be involved in the discussion, in the conversation, because there's truly different perspectives that we each have. As many of you all know, we're coming out of January, which is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And then honestly, it should be every single month should be Human Trafficking Awareness Month. But as we're coming out of it, we're focusing today on youth that are being trafficked and even the impact of how it might impact our youth ministries, the youth that we work with, and so forth. So for those of you who might be new to understanding what human trafficking is, but are still trying to understand it, U.S. law defines human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, and coercion to compel a person into commercial sex act, labor against their will. I really wanted to start off by talking about two different statistics that I have seen or know about that is really impacting our youth. The first one being 1 in 5 runaway and homeless youth are victims of human trafficking, inclusive of sex and labor trafficking. And of course, that number is constantly changing and more being impacted by it. But the second one being children account for half of the victims of human trafficking. So, in fact, the average age that a young person becomes involved in sex trafficking is 12 years old. And even in my nonprofit, we have worked with clients even younger than that. And so I want to start off the discussion with when we hear stats like that, how does it impact the work that we're doing, but also how are we seeing that number or those numbers being challenged even right now. And so for those of you who are in that field, or those who have youth that are actually coming to their youth ministries or that they are involved with it, are impacted by that, how is that impacting them? Who would like to start us off in that? Okay, well, Esther, can you share a little bit just from your perspective, of how it is directly impacting you all and the work that you all are doing?
Um, Thank you for having this provocative conversation, because I really feel that at this time the church is not awakened by really what's happening with the children. Personally, how it has impacted us is that that's what statistics says, that the average age is between 12 and 14, but they're younger. Let's keep it right. Let's keep it real. Unfortunately, too, what I'm also seeing is that, and I personally can talk to you, I'm not politically bind by anybody. My CEO is Jesus Christ, and you got to speak the truth. And we have 9-year-olds that are being trafficked. So in my city, what happens is they try to keep it all on the DL, and I believe that it is the responsibility of the church to actually protect these little ones and work with ministries like ours, because even though you may also have a public charity, sometimes what happens is these children feel very unsafe at a church, because it is at the church they were sexually exploited. So why are we a little bit different is because we have a drop-in center and we have opened it up to the kids. It doesn't look like a center, it looks like a house. You come in, it's very welcoming. I believe that the church needs to be much more proactive in working with public charities that are para-church ministries, but know how to communicate effectively with these kids. These kids have been judged. These kids, most of them are runaways. How are they going to seek the help if every adult that they come in contact with wants something of them? So I think that at this point, where I'm coming from is having a non-judgmental approach and opening the doors of your center or even at your churches to just establish that rapport with exploited adults and children. They have one thing in common: you got to earn the trust, and you can elaborate on that, Monique. That is lacking, because every person that they come in contact, including, listen to this, cops, they want something out of them. And unfortunately, in my city, and I'm not trying to badmouth, I'm speaking truth because I am the child of the Most High God, is that they've also been exploited by children. So I think you need to elaborate on that, because in our population specifically, you got to earn the trust. It just doesn't happen that way. Does that make sense? Does
It
that make
does.
sense? Okay.
It's very interesting because when you say earn the trust, oftentimes the ones that were closest to them were the ones that broke the trust. And so in us opening up this chance, and you're like, okay, here you are, a stranger. And the person that I knew, I was not trustworthy. They didn't protect or steward well that relationship or what I shared with them. So in us providing it, sometimes I feel, and Robynne, I would love to hear your thoughts or anyone else's thoughts when it comes to them sharing their truth or sharing even because I feel like what I've seen with survivors is they have done the test share. So what that means is they give you a little bit, see how you handle it. If you don't handle it well, or you don't respond well to what they just shared, that's it. You failed. I won't share anymore. Or they'll share a little bit more. And if you do well, it's like, okay, they start testing the waters. And sometimes when they test it, they love to throw something that's so grand that it's like, can I shock you? Can I throw you off? But Robynne, even in your world, how has it been?
I like that little the little test. You don't know you don't know you're being tested. And sometimes I'm like, that's why I'm so busy, because I get them, they tell me everything. But I want to encourage you before I answer that question, if you don't have to know everything. And so you're probably coming here today on a grand spectrum, but even not being scared of that test, but having a posture of, I call it the Safeway approach. When you go to Safeway and you ask where something is, when the staff member's like, I don't know, and you're left no better off. But when the person says, I'll take it's in aisle 3, it's halfway, and they take you, we can take that approach too of helping the young person get to the next steps of, like what Esther's saying about partnering with other organizations as well. And you may be here today to add resources and tools to your toolbox to do that. So everything's good, the next step for yourself. I find, because I've been doing this for a very long time, and in my neighborhood, if they don't know me specifically, I just look like a white lady walking around the neighborhood. I like that my accent is still as strong as ever, and that helps reduce some barriers as well. But I've been here a long time too, so a lot of youth do know me. So I'm finding that test approach is through relationship and being trusted in the community, Monique, where I don't really get people that just walk off the street, that find me by themselves. And that happened in Australia. That happened when I was doing work in Thailand. It usually is like word of mouth. And I intentionally place myself in different parts of the community to make myself available. And so it's usually a cousin, a sister, a friend, or someone else. The networking is important. And then they've referred them to us, even if they're homeless or they're hungry. But it's my expertise of the anti-trafficking layer that even the person that brought them might not realize they're being trafficked, but thankfully God brought them my way. And I definitely take the same approach as Esther. And I definitely trust that anyone that has come my way, even if they were at the food market next door, God ordered their steps for that combat to happen. Some of them I never hear from again, and I've offered them every kind of resource, and I can help you, and they know that they need it. And that's a natural reality as well that just happens sometimes.
That's good. Anyone else?
Can I say something? As I was listening to Robynne and Monique, if you ever come in contact with someone, because I'm in the hub of everything, and this is kind of new to me, I have to confess, working with the kids. I do work with kids now. We're using expressive arts to bring the healing. And with a child as well as with an adult, my approach is honor, respect, and connect. Again, honor, respect, and connect. They're already broken. Human trafficking is multifaceted trauma. They have been torn down into their spirit. You have to understand, I'm used to seeing people walking like zombies. They're zombies, even the kids, head down, sometimes crying. And the important thing is like, even if you have that opportunity to see their eyes, which I don't like to look at their eyes, because many of us know that your eyes is the window of the soul. You can see and you can feel the brokenness. When you maintain that eye contact, or they look at you, you got to encourage them. You got to let them know, I don't know. And I'm not saying that you need to say, I know what you're going through, because a lot of people don't know what you're going through. But if you acknowledge that they are a survivor, that they are strong, that is your opportunity to gain that respect, because you're honoring them, you're validating their brokenness, but that you're going to be able to at least connect them to a resource. If we don't do that, we're not acknowledging them as human beings. That is what the secular world is about. They become a number, they become a statistic. They are God's human being. And it frustrates me when I go into legislature or when I'm in the schools and every person out there, especially these kids, they're numbers, they're not numbers. Validate them, make them feel like they're a boy, make them feel like they are a young girl, because they need somebody to connect. And you know, as children of God, we're all God's children. We have that opportunity. So please remember, honor, respect, and connect with them, because that is your opportunity for you to bring forth the healing.
That's good.
That's all.
Amen.
That's good.
Hey, Monique, if you don't mind, for a quick, I don't want to turn the conversation a different direction, but I do want to bring this up real quick, and I meant to do this before I turned over this to you guys. So a couple of months ago, on the way to work, I drive my daughter to school. She's a high school freshman. Listening to the radio, there was a news story about some initiatives taking place in the state of Michigan to try to curb human trafficking and to address the issue, and who's allocating funds and that sort of thing. Listening to the story, driving to school. I drop her off, I head on into work. But before getting to work, I kind of have to go through an area, maybe considered a little high risk. Pull up to a corner and a traffic light, and I notice a young girl kind of standing there with no jacket on, and it's cold outside. And so another car pulls up to an adjoining street, and she kind of stares back and forth at the car a little bit and eventually walks over and gets in the car. Car had tinted windows, all right? At this point, I'm quivering on the inside because I know exactly what has just happened. I know exactly what just happened. So for a father that just dropped off a high school girl at freshman at high school, didn't have to see this taking place by somebody else's daughter on the street. I told my staff, I said, I'm having a hard time focusing this morning because of what I just saw. It just had me, just erupted emotionally on the inside. I think I even told Steph, I said, I just wanted to just jump out the car, go grab the person that was driving the car, yank him out, but at the same time, grab this little girl, put her in my car and say, you're going to safety somewhere now. But none of that happened, right? Because it's like, okay, I'm seeing this like out of nowhere. And so for some of us that may not be doing ministry, but are in those spaces where you see this happening, at some point in time today, we can just kind of speak to those that are observers and onlookers. What's the approach? What do you say, or can you say anything if you see it happening, to maybe just stand in the way, or do you not? What's the wisdom there? Because my emotions want to jump out the car, beat up somebody, and then take somebody to a place of safety.
Well, that's a very normal response. I would say don't do that. Well, what can I do? You can always take a photo of the license plate and report it to local authorities. Mm-hmm. And they turn over their phones and cars it still helps. Even though we can know there's lots of there's practical things that we can do. Sometimes the local authorities squash it as well. But there is also the national hotline as well, which is usually for specifics, but everyone in this area and in this industry takes it seriously. So even if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in one state, but I called the national hotline, you're not being overreactive. That person will at least then be a resource to get you back to your local information if you don't know. But local authorities should be taking that seriously, because you are the eyes and ears in that exact moment as well.
And they don't want that in their city. To know, to have someone calling, to have someone making what they would consider a fuss over the issue is a problem. And the more we are showing awareness, the more that you're even bringing attention to that corner, it makes more attention be on that corner. So where that young lady is, I totally agree with Robynne. Do not approach. We would never say to approach. And although, if you're anything like me, ever since when I first saw Taken back in 2010, when it came out, I wanted to be Liam Neeson. I wanted to have a special set of skills to go in and literally, okay. But I've come to understand that there are ways that can be harmful or helpful. But bringing awareness and even becoming aware of human trafficking organizations within your area help as well, because they have skills and they have things that they're able to do to, whether it's do outreach in that area or not. But I feel like knowing and being aware of what's in your area helps, so that even sometimes when they may come out or ask for help, you know exactly where to direct them to, and not necessarily just calling the police as a, that's not always helpful.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate that.
No worries. So I think the other thing is about the young woman. Sometimes that's a very specific scenario, and there's probably 10 different examples of how what you could observe and witness as well. We never know what's going. If you even see a woman standing on the street, you don't know who's around. You don't know how deep they are in it, and there is danger with that, because you'd be cutting off someone's. I don't like talking about people like that, but this is the cold hard truth of this topic. They are someone else's income supply. This is a power imbalance and a power dynamic, and it is very normal to want to take hold of that scenario then. But I think, yeah, we've spoken a bit about that.
And
So
one second, Robynne. Angela had unmuted herself and was about to say something. So go ahead, Angela, say what you wanted to say, and then we'll go back.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just going to comment on what Gerald said. That's a lot of the feedback that I'm receiving here in Atlanta, that feeling of helplessness, not knowing what to do. And so my role with the mayor's office of violence reduction is to pull together all the human trafficking agencies so that we can hear what is the consistency for the city, what's needed, and then how can we get that training to the everyday citizen, the everyday resident. And so from what they told me was they would like to do that training in the churches with the faith community, because people feel safest, whatever that faith, if it's at the mosque, if it's at the temple, wherever that is. And so that's what I'm trying to do now. And then also the other approach is to train the hotels. We've seen a very organized approach to human trafficking, where we're hosting FIFA World Cup and we'll be hosting the Super Bowl, and they're not coming here with the best intentions. So I'm working on a strategy citywide, pulling all agencies together on how we educate people. I'm working with UPS. How do we educate your truck drivers? So when they see someone in a uniform, they're stopping and saying, hey, I'm in a situation, can you help me? But the drivers are saying when they try to ask for help, they don't know what to do to help them. They know they're being trafficked, but they're like, I don't know, I'm just the driver of the truck. So I got on this call to try to hear from you guys some of the strategies you're using, what's working in your cities. What have you seen from the government side as well? Any recommendations would be helpful.
I know specifically for Charlotte, and I would encourage you to look as well for Atlanta. We actually have a human trafficking division within our police force that is very active and busy in our area. And so I would encourage you first to, even in light of the work that you're doing, connect with them. But even in connecting with them, they have specific, organizations that they go to immediately that might provide specific training for your area. I've learned even in our area where we had like FBI, the FBI agent had a specific nonprofit that they would always call with all of their clients, because it was a organization that they trusted. So I would encourage you to go that route first, because they are going to have a different viewpoint, and that should hopefully help. Robynne, I will turn it back to you. Sorry.
So I would like to put out the question for you all. What barriers have you encountered, and what steps are you taking to address them? As you're thinking about that, I thought I'd share some of mine. I'm based in the Bay Area, but I work across the country trying to relocate, and when we've rescued some of our victims, being in the local area is not the best approach. But we do have a national issue, and there is a national shortage of beds, especially for minors who are being trafficked. Yeah. And every area, every state has different legislation that either helps and upholds the protection, and sometimes our legislation actually works against the very thing our children need. So I've had experiences of up to 3 or 4 months of trying to find a bed for a young person that needs to be placed into safety. The fact that even from a funding standpoint, when we are trying to fundraise for ministry, a lot of our supporters want photos and videos and to promote the work, and they want a direct testimony. I'm like, that is the hardest thing. And I'm doing a documentary on the impact of technology on trafficking in the Bay Area at the moment. And so the thing that helps propel is what the devil is not creative. He just mimics. And so he'll be using it for evil as well. And not to be fearful of it, but it's hard to, it's not a fun topic to raise money for as well. And I wish I could raise money on a general basis for as much as I can when the crisis hits. But the fact that there's little rivers that flow in and out of the realities of those barriers too, and the lack of education in the community in the early stages does make it a challenge. So that I don't want to be worrying about rescuing all the time. I'd like to do prevention of the exploitation end of things too, which I'm sure we all do. And I think today is a good example of that. I love what you're doing. Thank you. It is every piece of the puzzle matters, and it's such a big job, and it's like everything that we do makes a difference to that story or to that part of the community. FBI, local police, the DA's office, they can be our best help and our hardest challenge as well. And yes, there's corruption. Yes, there's busyness. And all I say is if you find a good person, even if they're in a different county to you, they still, again, the people in this industry still want to help. And then my other barriers have been, the trust or for young people or their access to trusted people. And they're all different facets of the same challenge. What barriers have you encountered, and have you had any successful steps to address that?
Well, for me, some of our barriers that we're having is all of our clients are undocumented. We support not just survivors, but their families as well. So them and their survivor families, and where we are currently right now as a nation, many of them who already were not receiving governmental resources because of them being undocumented, they are also struggling with fear of deportation, and in them being deported, going back to the very place where the trafficking started. And so there's a struggle for us as we are doing our best to try to get them proper documentation and things that they need so that in them finding safety here, they will be able to stay. But also trying to make sure, in the midst of providing them resources, many of them already have housing. It's not, the greatest housing, but they do have housing where they are safe. But it's the other resources that they need and governmental assistance that they need that they're not able to oftentimes get, like it was when I first started, and I had a lot of American clients, or US born clients, I should say. And it was easier for them to get resources. That's just us. I'm not sure about other people.
I do echo the housing, and that housing's my pillar of ministry with Turntable Housing specifically, because if they can have a safe place to belong, whether that's, and I talk about safe places, like that can be, some of our youth don't even feel safe in their mind or feel safe in their body. So helping them to feel that, but then hopefully in their bedroom or their studio, in their street, in their community. But the housing helps get some of the other things taken on. However, you need all those other things to make the housing successful. So, but the barriers, addressing housing is a good one for sure. Does anyone else have any, even if it's a question, you might see a barrier, but we can bounce around.
I can pop in here a minute with a couple of thoughts. I have worked with, prior to working at DVULI, and I currently am also somewhat connected with a anti-trafficking group in Grand Rapids. And I think one of the biggest things is that people don't want to talk about it, which is the wrong thing to do. And so just making the conversation out there so that not only like the people, obviously we need to have the providers, so medical providers, police, firemen, like someone mentioned UPS, like all of those folks aware of the trafficking situation, but even starting, you know, with talking with our youth and talking with others about this crisis that no one wants to talk about, so that they're aware and can identify things within the community, because if we believe it's not in our community, we won't see it.
Absolutely.
Based on those who are on the call right now, are you able to do like a raised hand to let us know if you specifically already are working in the anti-trafficking field?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it if for what?
For those who are currently work with survivors, how many of you all currently work with survivors who are on the call? Okay, that's good to know.
What about, do you think you might have a survivor?
You know, I was going to ask the question. I mean, I volunteer at my church youth ministry. We have a Sunday night service, packs in about 100, 150 kids.
Okay.
Some from public schools, some from private schools, some from urban, some from suburban. Reading whether or not somebody might be a victim, I have no clue. If they don't come and tell me, or to pray for this, or if someone comes and tells, hey, I know that so-and-so is being trafficked, but she's not saying anything or whatever, there's no way to find out. In most cases, you're not even going to get that. What are some of the signs? How can you,
So I wouldn't say, if I'm going to put some signs out there, but I wouldn't say, I'd caution you first not to just look at one or two of those things and think it equals trafficking. But it's the culmination, and I mean, we do Dr. Google with a bunch of stuff for ourselves as well, but it's helpful to just know as well. What someone talked about eye contact or no eye contact. Now, that's not just equals trafficking either, but it's about also knowing the general dynamic of a young person. And some of our young people come to our youth groups already in a state. Imagine they show up and they're being trafficked. You don't know what they used to be like in their ideal state, best on their best days. But some of those tangible things like makeup, eyelashes, clothing, phones, all those, if they say you have a young person that loses their phone all the time, but they just seem to always get that the new phone comes up. You can see some of those things, the demeanor, the emotional reactions are really large, especially around anger. And that even truancy with school attendance, if they were once going to school quite well and a distinct and immediate drop in grades, and even substance use, drug and alcohol use, those types of things can on their own are not an indicator, but you start to learn more in that way, start to build a story and even an observation.
I would even say they're vulnerabilities. If you would look at some of the vulnerabilities that some of our youth face, whether it's homelessness, whether it's they come from a family with addiction, they are a latchkey kid. I know back in the day we would look at latchkey kids and it was just like, okay, you know, but as we're looking at those who've been sexually abused, we have a young lady that, you know, how schools have made it easier in giving them iPads. This young lady, her mother transferred her from one school to another school because of her addiction to porn. And in her having this addiction, she was like, I've taken all electronics away from her. She has no cell phones, no nothing. But then the school gave the little girl an iPad, because she has to do her schoolwork. And the girl, with all the firewalls that the school has on it, was still able to access it on her school laptop or iPad. And so in it, this young lady, there's been exposure in that sense, but in the midst of the exposure in that sense, she has started having sex. The mom has been having different challenges with her. So from attitude to over sexualizing everything, the addiction to pornography, because I think sometimes even in that, it's something that we don't oftentimes talk about within our youth ministries. We have to look at the fact of the exposure to various sexual opportunities that are presented to our kids. And so vulnerabilities and focusing on those vulnerabilities will also help you, Gerald, in seeing people and being like, oh, okay, not necessarily you're in it or involved in it, but you have opened up yourself to be a target for this particular, to be trafficked.
And I know that Esther's unmuted and I'm gonna let her talk, but I'm just gonna probably toss this in also. So given that, whether you see the signs, hear something, suspect something, it would be great to know if there's some resources, and I'm probably getting into your next prompt question about, how do you approach the conversation? And then I think in some regards, depending upon the gender of the young person, is it better for them to have a conversation with somebody of the same gender? And if that's not an option, if this the youth pastor and the youth pastor is a male and it's a female situation, what's how do you how do you start it? Yeah.
I think you have to have the diversity personally of males and females.
Yes, I
Because
agree.
in the male and female ratio, there are youth who've been violated by someone of the same sex. So because of that, they don't trust the same sex and they would want the opposite sex, and vice versa. Or they may trust, you want to have a diversity of people available to that have been known as safe, that are safe, that they can talk to. I'm sorry, Esther, go ahead.
No, I agree with you with that, because unfortunately, the majority of the women that I work with, they have runaways. They were runaway. And I think we also need to address the LGBTQA plus population. They are definitely at risk too. I think from the standpoint, being professionally, even when I counsel a woman, I need to have somebody there with me, because I've been sexually harassed by victims. They think, they don't know the difference between compassion, and lust. I'm not lusting after them, but that's what they know. Lust for them is seen not only as a way of survival, especially the young people. What I can tell you when it comes to the youth, the teenagers, if they're wearing expensive clothes, why is a homeless child wearing Jordans? Think about that. They had to do something in exchange for those Jordans, or wearing the expensive jeans, or wearing, the gold, the gold ring or the gold chain. um, that's what I'm seeing here in Columbus. We don't have enough what is called drop-in centers. If the kids are couch hopping, they're still homeless. And I will tell you, like 95% of the times, they're going to be sexually exploited. 2 weeks ago, I had a teenager email me saying that she got gang raped at a drop-in center. You listen to this, a drop-in center that's specifically here to help these children. So at a drop-in center, it's not a shelter. It's just a place that they come in and they come out, but they're allowed to sleep upright, but they don't have beds. So we need to I think from my standpoint and where God has led me this year is to go to the problematic area and educate the kids. Speak to the principals, because like you said, like Robynne was saying, I work directly with the people, but we also have to do the prevention. Who else? Who else can talk about this? I think it's the people that are on the panel here to go into those problematic area, because that's where the Lord placed me on the west side. So now I'm in the middle school, the worst school, the worst middle school, the worst high school. Those are the areas that those kids are being trafficked. So if we talk about the sexting, we talked about the the porn is a big thing. I didn't know about it until COVID-19 hit. It opened the world. I have 12-year-olds who are coming to our program and they're already connected on porn. I know it's the boys, but I know it can also be girls, so I think it's important for us to be educated on this. But as youth leaders, get some PowerPoint, talk to Monique. Maybe we can create. I have my own little, PowerPoint that's effective for the middle schoolers. I'm in the process of creating one for the high school. Engage them in conversation, because the best tool is to be educated. If you're educated and you know the signs of what forced coercion and fraud is, that will help them not be a target by the predators and the system that it's supposed to help them, but it's not. And unfortunately, I don't have much good experiences here in Columbus, but I do my best, to connect them to resources that I know that are going to help. Another barrier too, as a nonprofit, you got to understand too, the liability insurance. It's extremely high to work with children, and I can't have a safe house for children because it'll be like $25,000, and right now our liability insurance has gone up from 10,000 to 17,000 this year alone. So you also have to understand that when you're in the nonprofit sector, if you're working with kids, it's a liability. I'm keeping it real.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
And Gerald, even when you're talking about curriculum, I think that it is important that we bring the teachings of human trafficking into the church. So to our youth ministries specifically. So helping them. So in Charlotte, we have a law. I don't know if it's just Charlotte or if it's just North Carolina in general. In health class, they actually teach, I think starting in 8th grade, on human trafficking. So it's part of the health class. Now, while it's still I feel like an overview and not an in-depth view of it, I feel like there still should be some form of awareness. There has to be a way that we help them understand even how, because of course they want to say, not me, that wouldn't happen to me, when they find themselves deep in it. You know what I mean? Oh, that's something that happens to that child. And so I've had opportunities to even speak at different churches, to youth ministries, whether it was the youngest to the oldest, but it was hard because oftentimes they didn't necessarily have the amount of teachers or youth leaders available that were considered safe, that felt comfortable enough for those conversations to be had with them. And so that oftentimes, you nailed it. It's right, where people struggle with that. Aaron said, when I was introduced about 10 years ago, Grace Haven was a great resource for youth in this conversational space in Columbus. I don't know if that's still available, Esther, but that was something.
It still is. I just have my own opinion about him. Yeah, because that's all I'm gonna say. I'll keep my comments to myself. I'm a bullhorn for the truth. That's all I'm saying.
And that's what we love about you, Esther, and having you on this call. I wonder if there's a few other people that might have things to say. One of the things, I worked in residential treatment before. I worked with some outpatient folks as well. And one of the factors we always looked for, especially in the problematic sexual behavior homes, was self-esteem.
Mhm.
because oftentimes sexually acting out is more about self-esteem initially than it is about like I mean, obviously there's a lot of, like Esther mentioned, pornography and things like that available to youth, greater than ever has been available before. But that's one thing that when you look at a youth group or you look at people, like just kind of watch for where kids are and their self-value. Maybe it's not the lacking eye contact, but the looking down. Because that can be a real trigger, a real opportunity for traffickers to love them in a way that they think they haven't been loved before.
Yeah, that's good. But Stephanie, I do want to ask you one more question, because even in the mental health space, right? With, I know how we have experienced with many of our survivors, with those youth who are in those youth ministries, how does even mental health play a part from your perspective on?
People are dynamic, so that all plays into it. You know, ultimately folks want to belong, right? They want to be connected. And we find ways to gain that sometimes in the most unhealthy of ways. So that's my perspective on that one. I think, you know, we have an opportunity to reach kids, but people take those opportunities in negative ways. And it's always a fight against the devil, right? It's kind of what Esther was talking about earlier. Yeah, but yeah, mental health plays a role in it. You mentioned earlier too, like the family dynamics, the trauma that kids face, the devaluing of themselves. There's a lot there.
And I think it's important that we understand, because this is our approach, we can't help just the child. You have to help the whole family as a whole. Many organizations will help the survivor without helping her child as well, or his child as well, or their child as well. Not understanding that everyone has been victimized. And just the level of their victimization, it might be different. But if we don't help the family as a whole, then we continue the cycle on. So it's very important that the entire family is in turn helped through it. We have a lot of people on this call, and so there has to be some many of you that are muted. I don't want to just call names out, that have a perspective that you might want to share.
Well, may I jump in really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I work at a nonprofit in Miami. We focus a lot on prevention. So we go into the community, we talk to the youth, about healthy relationships, a lot of different things, and the science of a healthy relationship, and those things that you don't want to fall into. White flags, red flags, everything, using an evidence-based curriculum. But one of the biggest things that we do is that we also do parent workshops, for the parents to be involved, for those people that are people in the community that see the kids, that look at those signs and they can say, hey, you know what, this person is going through something. So for us, it starts at home. And a lot of us as parents, we are so involved with life and whatever goes on that we miss some of those signs at home. We don't necessarily just need to look at the kids that are out in the streets, but and I think it's important for parents and those how do you call it, significant adults as well in those youth's life, for them to see these things. And it's important for the church as well to notice that, because you know our kids go to a safe space. They go to practices, they go to whatever their activities or their interests are, and that's where they escape. But if you take the time just to look at their story, or to listen to them, or to see their actions, you're gonna see some things that require some attention. And that's what I love too, is that was mentioned, not to look at just all the signs and symptoms. You're not gonna see all of them, but you got to see some of those things. And sometimes when I'm facilitating, I'm looking around the room to see how people are reacting to what I'm saying. And when you see a tear, when you see somebody turn away, put their head down, when you bring in a specific thing, and a lot of parents don't, whenever we're done with that workshop with the parents, they're like, I did not know this. I'm gonna go home and do this. I'm gonna have other people as well for them to also look at some of the signs and symptoms for them to know. So I think education for prevention is big, but also that kind of like leads to be able to see people that actually need some type of intervention or help.
That is so beautiful. Emotional
Excellent.
intelligence is gonna every human needs emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
But if you build that emotional intelligence, you're going to help yourself, but you'll help your immediate world, but then your ministries will definitely benefit as well. I wanted to highlight a couple of things, and piggybacking off what you were saying, social isolation is typically one of the biggest contributors to sexual exploitation, which is the early stages. So social inclusion is important, which comes back to the age-old, it takes a village to raise a child. We need the village even as adults. And going the African proverb about going farther, we go further by going together. And all of those things we throw around, we say, but it is so true. And so the hardest thing about social isolation and the contribution to sexual exploitation is we're all so busy. We're needing time, and it's like the most precious commodity, but we can't, we're too far gone in that sense to not, but we have to slow it down, and we can't afford to not be too busy. Boys can be trafficked as well. Pimps can be women. It's think about this in the layer, I call it the tiramisu of trauma, but really all those layers, it's about a power imbalance, or as life gets harder. So there's not just necessarily a perpetrator and a victim. Sometimes who we see as the perpetrator is a victim as well, within the food chain, so to speak. And I want the whole food chain to come to know Jesus. We might be called to help the victims, but the people that are imposing this, I hope there's some ministries working on that as well, but that's not what I'm called to do. And then the last thing I want to say is the trafficking realities. Whilst we might be talking about sexual exploitation or sex trafficking, there is labor trafficking and drug trafficking, and it's hard. I mean, the way that plays out is different as well, can be a challenge. But we're here for it. I wanted to help you feel like you're not just left with a whole bunch of facts and problems and not have anywhere what's next. Professional development resources and seminars and conferences that can be on your radar. I have got some, I can throw out some names, but Stephanie's got the information as well around so I'm based in the Bay Area, so some of mine are more Bay Area specific. However, the beauty of technology, it's available to you, and that information is also, there's a lot of international data around the connection between foster care and trafficking and juvenile justice involvement as well. Two of our alumni, Benita is one of the co-chairs for the San Francisco Collaborative Against Human Trafficking, and Sable Horton, who is a 2023, she's from my cohort. She's a trainer specifically on anti-trafficking in the West Coast Children's Clinic. I personally offer one-on-one coaching sessions that you're welcome to reach out to me if you want to do a deep dive in your specific needs. And that can be just about you. How do you stay healthy in the work so that you do the work and not burn out? Or it could be specific case studies and those sorts of things. So please feel free to reach out to me. And there's a National Center on Sexual Exploitation. New York City Child Trafficking Prevention does a lot of series throughout the year, and they're really good too. And from a conference standpoint, I would highly recommend the JUST conference, which is the nation's leading conference on juvenile sex trafficking. But I just threw that all out there, but we've got some links if that's helpful moving forward.
And I would encourage you all to just stay connected as you're seeing names. There are even more that are not necessarily here that we've been connected through DVULI that I would encourage you to connect with, because they may know things in your city. They may have a contact in your city, and you may have contacts in other cities. So as you see them, please definitely remain connected. Esther?
Amen.
Amen. And Gerald, if you're speaking, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. That little red microphone thing. Good Lord. I'm going to drop something in the chat, and it's actually just a YouTube link that came from Esther the other day, and it was sounds the alarm. And we don't have time to show it on this, to show it live here, but you know what? I'm sorry. I just sent it to one person and I need to send it to everyone.
Thanks, Gerald.
You got me. Here we go. Cut and paste that and you take a peek at it when you get the opportunity. It set off a loud alarm that sometimes even the police don't get it right.
She can. She's 11.
And you couldn't wait, could you? So, and we have to be mindful of the fact that not everybody, even the cops, law enforcement, know what the heck they're doing. And while we might want to trust authorities in some cases, they need to be educated too. And perhaps the reason you're on this call is that you might encounter someone that's in authority that might need to be educated, about, some things that they need to be enforcing as well. So before we wind down, I want to give Esther about a few seconds to give some final remarks. And if there's anything more you want to say, again, thank you, sister, for the work you're doing and for the work that all of you are doing in your context, whatever that is, even if it's just loving on our young people at Sunday church or whatever you're doing to mitigate what could be at-risk behavior and forming relationships and building trust. Those things are phenomenal and much needed and can't have enough of it. But Esther, yep.
I guess the last thing I was gonna say is that we need to remember that Jesus Christ was a human trafficking survivor. He was sold by one of his boys for 20 shekels, for 30 shekels, and which is the equivalent of what the price range right now of what a human trafficking victim is worth. So if anything, just know that as broken as they are, they need to be reached, not preached to first. They're hungry, feed them, then offer a prayer, introduce them to the love of Christ, because the love of Christ can truly bring them the whole healing that they need. It has to be holistically. That's all. And just pray for all of us who are working with youth, because the youth has a lot of potential, and that's why the enemy wants to destroy them.
Thank you so much, Esther. And again, thank you to Robynne and thank you to Monique as well for your expertise and your time to moderate this call with us. It means the world to have our alumni with this kind of expertise to facilitate conversations around this. This conversation does not have to end because of this call. I mean, you guys are going to get an email with all this information as well as the recording of this conversation. And so just know that, we will do our very, very best to keep you equipped as much as possible. We'll coordinate this again. I want to also acknowledge Thomas Burkeen. He is our liaison. I was about to say alumni, but liaison for not only Columbus, but Washington, D.C. as well. And Thomas, good to have you on the call also. Thomas, I'm going to invite you to close this out in prayer and just play a covering over all those that are doing this work and just extend blessings upon those. But if I could also just be a little partial and say this, I'd love to acknowledge the men that are on this call. Yeah. It means a lot to me to see brothers that want to hear, learn, and be engaged and know that this is not limited to gender by any means whatsoever. And there is a misfortune that there are our young men that are being trafficked also, pimped, if you want to use that word, I mean, in some horrible ways. And so we need to know what's going on. We need to be equipped and we need to do the work that God has called us to do to intervene and love on these people in a healthy way. All right. Thomas, I'll let you close out. You need to unmute, sir. There we go.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Lord, we thank you for the conversation and perspectives that we have heard from this call. Lord, we thank you for those who are entrenched in the depths of this work and are doing their best to not only be there for those who are doing this work, but providing resources for us so that we can be more aware. Lord, we just pray right now, Lord, that you will continue to touch and bless those who are surrounded through their organizations as a touch point through this work. And we just pray right now, Lord God, that you would continue to keep us guided even when we come in contact with situations like Gerald spoke about, and be able to understand what is what is it that we need to do and how we should react and who we should contact when we are faced with these situations. Make us more aware in our cities, and most of all, make us more aware in our ministry so that we can partner with organizations like these so that we can do this work greater. Lord, we thank you, we love you, praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We will be on next month, on March the 21st, our